not be able to make it today, so we are going to be focused on the paper of our colleague Ado Pagdinawan and what I have prepared on the issue of trade and economics in the hopes that this may sort of guide our nation slowly away from or to keep a balance between the politics and the economic issues in the national agenda. Because right after the election, as we can see, the political harangue, the political mudslinging is continuing. We are not getting any rest from the divisiveness of Philippine politics, which is the least that we need today.
Danny.
Is this Danny? Danny, we started. So anyway, Danny, take over sa introduction.
Hello, good morning. Apologies with stuck in traffic. Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Long from Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies. And today's forum is entitled Midterm Votes for Philippine Sovereignty and the US Trading System after a few months of Trump in office and the trade war and its effects on the global markets. We'll be recapping the recent May 12, 2025 midterm elections in the Philippines. And then we'll also be talking about the effects of Trump's trade war and how the Philippine economy is responding and how it may adapt to these developments. First, let's of course begin. He already began Kamentong Laurel to give us the theme and the background for today's symposium.
Yeah, Danny,
Yeah.
your nameplate is still there.
Yeah.
But anyway, if I may clarify, first of all, our provincial reactors are, some of them are present already. Our friends from our reactor from Cebu City, Radio Man, and I think he shares in the victory of Pam Baricotro because he also interviewed Pam, the biggest upset in the Philippine elections this past days. And Rico Osmeña will be joining us in a while. He's still on his radio program. Edmund Pancha will be joining us as scheduled, but he is not yet with us at the moment. He is participating from Tuguegarao City in Cagayan Province in the north, the closest province to the Taiwan province of China. And we are always eager to have him participate because it's very relevant. They have they're hosting 2 US bases in Cagayan Province. Edmund Pancha last session of ours also attended, but suddenly his internet was cut off. Maybe he's still having problems with the same internet service right now, but we will await him. We also have from Iloilo, Celso Cainglet will be our reactor from Iloilo City in the Visayas. We are going to miss Tess Padla of Cagayan de Oro. She begged off for today, but we were hoping we could have Bombo Lawrence of Cagayan de Oro, but we have not had a response yet. We have Benjamin Contreras in Cagayan de Oro. We don't know if he is going to participate, but we did talk to him. But let's see if he will open his microphone later on to ask questions and contribute some views. Okay, so with that, we will start with Kaado Pagdinawan and you to add commentary to the elections because Danny Long was very, very active directly with the campaigns of the PDP Laban. So I asked him to share some of his observations in the elections. But the paper of Kaado Pagdinawan, I think is very important because it stresses one very important point that we have been crusading for the past decade and a half, 15 years, that China is not an issue. And the anti-China candidates, significant candidates who use the issue to campaign, has lost. And the independent foreign policy advocates in our Philippine politics are showing that they can win on that platform. So, Danny, back to you.
Thank you, Kamintong. Yes, of course, let us begin with Takado Paglinawan to give us a recap of the recent 2025 midterm elections and to present his paper and presentation on what this means for the China issue that they're trying to hype up in the media and by the politicians. Let's welcome Takado Paglinawan for his opening statement.
Good morning to all of you. My dissertation this morning is entitled A Vote for Sovereignty as Midterm Elections Confirm a Nation at the Eve of Moral and Economic Decay. Now, when I was writing this, I sent it to a friend, and he said, why did you include political decay? Well, I said, wala na yung politika, kako. Bagoong na yun. Huh? We're not at the eve of a political decay. We are in the midst of political decadence. To illustrate this, Francis Tolentino, who pitched himself on the campaign trail as a candidate who stood against China's alleged bullying in the South China Sea, and who released a volume of fake news about China spies, troll farms, internet warriors, and whatever. He even showed a check, a legitimate check, that was paid legitimately to a PR firm who had also engaged in event organization, and the check was really a payment for its services. Francis Tolentino is ranked 25th among senatorial bets in the 2025 polls, where only 12 will get a seat. A chairperson of the Senate Special Committee on Philippine Maritime and Admiralty Zones, Tolentino spearheaded the passage of the Maritime Zones Act and the Archipelagic Sea Lanes Act, twin laws that serve only the ambitions of the United States for its rule-based freedom of navigation in the South China Seas, but ran counter to the best interests of the Filipino people in achieving a preferential attention from China and other countries in building our economy. Since February 2023, Bongbong Marcos signed up with the United States for 4 additional sites to the initial 5 American bases for the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. We have to actualize the Pentagon's agile combat employment strategies, increasing forward operating jump-off points for the U.S. military, intended for its perceived war with China using the Philippine soil. Since then, Washington, D.C. has increased presence in what Senator Amy Marcos had exposed to be a total of not 9, but 25 areas in the country that could be targets of a possible Chinese hypersonic missile preemptive attack because of increased tensions in the South China Seas. One of these areas is Benito Ebuen Air Force Base in Mactan, Cebu. In this province, Pam Baricuatro, the organizer of the anti-war movement forum supported by the Asian Century Philippines Institute, staged an upset by a landslide against well-entrenched political dynasty of incumbent re-electionist Gwen Garcia, who had allegedly engaged in massive vote buying. In Cagayan province, the site of two EDCA sites, the candidate of outgoing Governor Manuel Mamba, former National Police Chief Edgar Aglipay, also won over anti-China Dr. Sara Lara. Mamba, who has also supported the Asian Century Institute's anti-war movement, achieved a landslide victory as Aglipay's vice governor. The Senate race was an eye-opener. Opposition candidates outperformed administration candidates. 5 were directly endorsed by the Dutertes: Bongo, Bato de la Rosa, Rodante Marcoleta, Camille Villar, and Jaime Marcos. 2 came from the Liberal Party remnants, Bam Aquino and Kiko Pangilinan. Although part of the Alyansa Bagoong ticket to President Bongbong Marcos, I am not too sure whether the last 5 are really pro-administration. I'm willing to grant that Erwin Tulfo, who I suspect is an insertion of Washington, D.C., because he is the only person I know who is not an American citizen but is a holder of an American passport. That means a lot of things for the immigration system in the U.S. I am willing to grant that Erwin Tulfo and Lito Lapid will toe the Marcos line. But I can't really say the same thing for Tito Soto, Ping Lacson, and Pia Cayetano, who have manifested in their former tenures a level of independence. This is pivotal for 2 reasons. First, the impending trial of impeached Vice President Sara Duterte. I think this impeachment is really already dead in the water. More than 3 senators have already voiced that they will question the constitutional points of the propriety of not entertaining the first impeachment complaint, but the 4th, 1, 2, 3, 4, when the Constitution provides that a succeeding complaint can only be filed at least 1 year after the first. Some senators have also voiced their objection, continuing the impeachment procedure in the 20th Congress of a business that was filed in the 19th Congress. These technicalities considered, and still the trial pushes through, my count is at least 10 senators in the 20th Congress will not vote to convict the Vice President anyway. These are Go, De La Rosa, Marcoleta, Mark and Camille Villar, Subiri, Alan Cayetano, Jaime Marcos, and Robin Padilla. 10th is Bam Aquino, who gave his word to the Iglesia de Cristo in exchange for the church endorsement. This is pivotal because, second, the quality of Philippine Congress has deteriorated into a pigsty for pork barrel rather than lawmaking. During Marcos's first 3 years, and the Senate must redeem its credibility and independence from the powers that be, and the lower house has already shown its allegiance to the highest bidder. I see in the horizon a possible change in the Senate presidency. I see a new ground for continuing electoral reform and remedial amendment for bad laws, especially as I see a more conducive environment for debates leading to an independent foreign policy, which is key to our fast recovery for our microeconomy and better lives for our people. Let's start with the bad laws. Republic Act 9522 degraded the territorial limits where we have sovereignty by historic rights in favor of exclusive economic zones where we have only sovereign rights or entitlements for resources under the water down to the seabed. This has caused, as this slide will show, a loss of sovereign territorial seas exchanged for sovereign rights by as much as 830,140 square kilometers. And we have the chart here. On the left, we have the extent of the maritime area. In the middle, we have the former baseline law with the Treaty of Paris delimitations, showing our treaty limits. And on the right, we have Republic Act 9522, which our legislators used to conform to UNCLOS, sacrificing sovereignty for sovereign rights. Internal or pelagic waters plus territorial sea. In territorial sea, this is where we have sovereignty. So when you deduct 940,260 square kilometers to what was lost in Republic Act 9522, reduced only to 110, 120 square kilometers, you have 830, 140 square kilometers lost. And even if the exclusive economic zone from nothing grew by over 1 million square kilometers, still, we do not have jurisdiction over the water and the aerospace above it. As to why our legislators in 2009 did this, I bet is in a poor understanding of the United Nations Convention on the Laws of the Seas. Because there are many countries that have just stayed quiet about this. And instead of boxing themselves inside their internal laws, they faced the biggest and most influential power in the area, which is China, and preferred to just negotiate with China bilaterally. In our case, we stonewall, we hardball, we put ourselves in the box. And in the midst of the inflexibility, now we are finding it hard to behave because we are caught in our own trap. We are even awkward in our negotiations, in our diplomatic relations with China. That is what is happening. This is the syndrome that is now prevalent in our government and especially in our uniformed personnel departments, showing that even our armed forces of the Philippines is very poor in acquiring intelligence for which objective analysis should be based, and instead adopts not even its own propaganda, but the propaganda of a third country, and adopts it as gospel truth and foreign policies based on false assumptions that do not benefit our people. The second aspect, in anticipation of the Kalayaan Island Group becoming incompatible with Article 47 of the UN Convention on the Laws of the Seas, the Tolentino Law ratified its conversion into Republic Act 9522's regime of islands. Next slide, please. Under Article 121, the arbitral award nullified. I would like to repeat, because they always claim the award is a victory for the Philippines. The arbitral award nullified the archipelagic claims of Presidential Decree 1596 in paragraph 574, but did not say anything about the regime of islands, as UNCLOS is not within jurisdiction to award sovereignty based on land. As a result, Bubitiglao says we gave up, or Marcos Jr. gave up what his father acquired, another 70,000 square kilometers of sovereignty claim. So if you look at the picture on the left, there is the polygon or the hexagon that Marcos Sr. created, or at least made an attempt to claim. And that extends westward. Note here that Parola, Padata, and a third feature, Kota, is within the quadrant, within the hexagon. When we went to the right, after the Maritime Zones Law this time, adopting PD 9522, there is no more Kalayaan Island Group, and sovereignty is limited to the tiny territorial seas of 4 islands. Yun lamang po ang natira. And this is not even titled sovereignty. This is just sovereignty by virtue of occupation that we have kept since 2002 only because of the Declaration of Conduct, which said that all the signatories in the DOC will refrain from going into the occupation of another feature. The arbitral award, confirmed by our own law, 9522, lost 70,000 square kilometers of territorial claim. Dinidiscuss po natin ito mga kabansa dahil ito pong eleksyon na ito ay tagumpay ng soberanya. Ito pong eleksyon na ito ay tagumpay ng pagpapahayag ng taong bayan na ayusin natin kung saan tayo mayroong tunay na soberanya. Hindi yung nagpepeke tayo dito, nang-aagaw tayo dito, at pinapatintero natin ang ibang bansa. At nagpapakita lamang tayo ng katigasan ng ulo. Pangatlo, the Tolentino Law Incorporated. Mga kabansa, the Tolentino incorporated not only the Presidential Decree 1596, sinama niya ang Republic Act 9522 at sa kasukdulan, ipinasok niya sa ating batas ang UNCLOS at ang 2016 Arbitral Award. So, isinabatas natin lahat ng feature ng Arbitral Award hook, line, and sinker, kasama yung mga feature na laban sa national interest ng Pilipinas. Kundi ba naman tungkol talaga itong si Tolentino? Kung paano ito nakalusot sa 24 senador at over 300 congressmen and 1 president, hindi ko maintindihan kung paano nangyari. Madam Amy Marcos, please take note if you're listening, because you are the chairman of the International Relations Committee. Ang unang-unang ginawa ng Tolentino Law, nilegislate niya ang inclusion ng territorial waters ng Scarborough Shoal as part of our maritime zone. This runs contradictory to the very law it incorporated, which is UNCLOS, because in international law, it is not legislation that creates the territorial sea, but the land feature from where it extends 12 nautical miles from. The territorial sea is not a matter of law. It is a matter of fact. On top of that, it is already under the sovereignty of another state. And in our last forum, we played a video of J. Tariela himself testifying to this truth. So wag kayong paloko-loko dyan. It is already under the sovereignty of another state by virtue of effective control. The shoal is. And it is the shoal that creates the territorial sea. Therefore, the territorial sea belongs to whomever is exercising sovereignty over the shoal. And that is not the Philippines. So by its very inclusion into our legal system, it is already a poison that escalates conflict with another state. Ito yung sinasabi ko. Kinakargahan natin ang laso ng sarili nating batas para lang i-justify ang adventurism ng Coast Guard, ng Armed Forces of the Philippines, ng National Security Council, at ang mga kalukuhan ng Office of the President. Pangapat, another aberration is the unilateral creation of a Luzon Sea that is not even registered in the International Hydrographic Organization and that goes way beyond our 12 nautical miles territorial sea. There is no Luzon Sea. So kinargahan pa ni Tolentino. Confusion in the use of terms sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction in order to obscure the fact that we do not have jurisdiction over waters covering our claimed exclusive economic zone, as UNCLOS only bestows sovereign rights to exploit what is under the water and in the seabed, but no exclusivity on what is over the water and the airspace above it. Such violates the freedom of navigation and overflight over high seas under Part 7 on high seas and its Article 86 applications, Article 87 freedom of the high seas, Article 88 reservation of the high seas for peaceful purposes, Article 89 invalidity of claims of sovereignty over high seas, and Article 90, right of navigation. Specifically, Article 89 stipulates no state may validly purport to subject any part of the high seas to its sovereignty. Meron ba kayong nakikita dyan na naglalayag na Chinese Coast Guard, Chinese militia, Chinese maritime vessel? Pag sila pumasok dyan, dire-diretso lang. And that is what Innocent Passage is all about. Walang nagpapatrolya dyan. Ang mga ginagwardyahan ng China, kung mapapansin ninyo, kung kayo'y tunay na nag-aaral, ay yung mga teritoryo na kontrolado nila. Hindi sila nagpapabanjing-banjing dyan na para silang kung sino na nagpapatrolya. From April 8 to 15, Chinese Coast Guard has a series of blocking and expulsion incidents with BRP Cabra as the latter insisted on patrolling the high seas, 78 nautical miles outside of our territorial seas. Next slide, please. On April 21, the Philippine, ito po, yung Cabra, ayun, yung pula at saka green. Nagpapatrolya siya 78 nautical miles outside of the Philippine territorial sea. 90 nautical miles from Zambales coastline. Pero malapit na siya, 18 nautical miles na siya from Scarborough territorial sea. Anong ginagawa ng BRP Cabra dyan? Ha? At lahat ng makita niyang mga bangka dyan, ay sina-challenge niya. Siya pa nagsa-challenge. Kasi sa utak ng daga ng mga namumulong sa Coast Guard at sinusuportahan naman ng Armed Forces of the Philippines, pwede silang magpatrolya sa ibabaw ng exclusive economic zone. Hindi po pwede po dahil high seas na yun. So we are in violation here. At hindi lamang Coast Guard. Noong April 21, the Philippine Navy ship BRP Apolinario Mabini entered the territorial, hindi lang sa labas ng territorial sea this time. At hindi lamang civilian vessel, military ship na po, pumasok sa loob ng territorial waters ng Scarborough Shoal on its way to the Balikatan exercises involving US and Philippine resources. What is BRP Cabra? Patrolling in high seas, and especially close to where China has effective control. Last May 5, ito, kailan na? Philippine Navy warship BRP Emilio Jacinto attempted to intrude the 12 nautical mile territorial sea of Scarborough Shoal that belongs to China. So, ano nangyari? The People's Liberation Army Southern Theater Command, which oversees the South China Sea, dispatched its naval and air forces to monitor, warn, and expel the ship. Makikita nyo sa ilalim yung blue. Pakaliwa. Dalawa pong bilog yan. Huh? Yung pinakadoob na bilog, yung po yung lagoon. That is identified kasi yung po yung maritime tayo eh. Ha? So yung unang circle, yung po yung 12 nautical miles ng Scarborough Shoal. Remember, the shoal is controlled by China. China is exercising sovereignty over it. Pangatlo, China's already filed last December its charge for a de jure claim with the United Nations and publication with the International Hydrographic Organization. Pero, pag kayo ay pumasok doon sa pangatlong bilog, babantayan na kayo ng China. At so, yung blue, pumasok pakaliwa, umanan, pero bago siya makapasok doon sa pangalawang circle, sinalubong na siya ng Chinese law enforcement at tinaboy siya palabas. Ayun, mga kabansa. Nasa kaliwa yung China, nasa kanan yun. Pero, sa mga nilalabas nila sa dyaryo, sila nang tataboy. Pero, in reality dyan, sila nang challenge. Sila nagpapalayag sa China doon sa territorial sea na kontrolado ng China. At pag hindi nila nagawa ang kanilang gusto, grabe ang reklamo nila, aggressive, unprofessional, maneuvers, bullying. Ay, sus, Mariosep. That is why we are appealing to Senator Amy Marcos to conduct a public hearing on why the Philippine Coast Guard, the National Security Council, and the Armed Forces of the Philippines, especially the Philippine Navy, are not only distorting the narrative in our South China Sea engagements, but subjecting our uniformed personnel to a clear and present danger of patrolling prohibited waters. Ito pong ginawa nilang itong pagpasok, attempt. Ito hindi pinapasok Emilio Jacinto. Pero yung Apolinario Mabini nakapasok. Nagpapatrolya ka at saka papunta ka sa military exercises. Is that innocent passage? Kasi pwede naman pumasok dyan Basta dire-diretso lang. Walang tigil. Walang paikot-ikot. Walang paliko-liko. Walang patrol-patrolya. Walang pa-challenge-challenge. You are subjecting our uniformed personnel to a clear and present danger of not only losing a thumb, but patrolling prohibited waters. These are justifications why Congress most urgently must conduct this constructive conversation in aid of legislation before somebody gets hurt. Kung yung pong Apolinario Mabini, pinalubog ng China nung pumasok siya sa territorial sea dahil nagpapatrolya siya doon. Hindi innocent passage. Hindi po arm attack yan. Preemptive defensive ho yan. Hindi tayo pwedeng mag-invoke dyan ng Mutual Defense Treaty. Una, at pangalawa, hindi po kasali ang South China Sea sa jurisdiction ng Mutual Defense Treaty. In the light of the utter rejection of the Filipino electorate of outgoing Senator Francis Tolentino, who is the symbolic champion of xenophobia in the legislature, it is about time to review this tonto law and fix it to remove the booby traps he created to provoke animosities not only with China, but with our neighboring countries. Dahil yung pong presence natin sa Commodore Reef, sa bandang ilalim ng Palawan na malapit na sa Malaysia, kinukontest din ng Malaysia. At itong mga islang ino-occupy natin, kinukontest po lahat ito ng Vietnam at saka ng Taiwan. Pero, lagi na lang China ang tinutulo natin. As we have proven today, if we cannot appropriate the territorial sea around Scarborough Shoal, if the Kalayaan Hexagon claim by PD 5096 has already been nullified by UNCLOS as confirmed by the arbitral award and PD 9522, which has been incorporated in Tonto Tolentino's Maritime Zones Act. If there is no basis for any Luzon Sea, if our jurisdiction on the surface of our claimed exclusive economic zone is in gross violation of another UNCLOS provision, then what remains of the so-called West Philippine Sea? But hot fart, utot, mga kabansa. This narrative and the anti-China propaganda that it has spawned leading to the wild goose chase for Chinese spies involving our very own civilian authorities like the National Bureau of Investigation and the Bureau of Immigration. is hurting our country. Time and again, Pulse Asia surveys show that it is only catering to 5% of our people's most urgent concerns. This false priority has stifled food security, resulting in subsidizing traders rather than farmers and agricultural producers, grossly inflating the prices of rice and other food products, reducing employment and livelihood opportunities in the countryside, pumping hunger rates to 27.2% and self-poverty perception to 63%, the highest in 21 years. This false priority has resulted in the embargo of infrastructure projects and investments coming from China, unreasonable quota for Chinese tourists, sending statistics from the 4 million in 2017 to 2019 to less than 1 million from 2022 to 2025. And handbrakes, the increased exports to China. Opportunities that have moved over to our other ASEAN neighbors, thus reducing our projected growth rates below 6% and kicking foreign indebtedness under Marcos to levels exceeding the combination of his past presidents. In return, anong nakuha natin sa US? Kundi tariff increase. This election is definitely a referendum exposing the utter incompetence of this administration to manage our country's affairs, not to mention the runaway corruption and suppression of human rights it is perpetuating. It is not Sara Duterte that must be impeached. It is Bongbong Marcos. There are now civil society groups that have organized to file impeachment proceedings against the president at the opening of the 20th Congress. We anticipate that to fuel the next people-powered regime change in this country, riding on the momentum of the administration's loss in the 2025 election for national position. With an 80% turnout at the polling booths, with thousands still disenfranchised, the people are now widely aware that it cannot be a Filipino who is systematically sending the Philippines to newfangled economic and moral ruin. It cannot be a Filipino who has premeditated, conspired, illegally arrested, illegally detained, and kidnapped foreign President Rodrigo Duterte and sent him to a foreign country for a dubious trial. It cannot be a Filipino who willfully escalates conflict in the high seas to push this country to a hot war against another state that is not its enemy. The Philippines, however, despite shared roots with China, is once again in bed with neo-colonial United States. It pains me to accept that we Filipinos romanticize our being brown brothers to the Americans, showing ourselves to be pawns to our former colonial masters' rule-based order, instead of learning from our ASEAN neighbors how to deal with neighboring China. Our lawfare in the South China Sea is not protecting our sovereignty. It is not protecting our territorial claims, but it's only ensuring that the United States has freedom of navigation for its war ships. Former President Duterte has taught us that China can be simply won. Madali po nating mapagpanalo ang Pilipinas. Dahil alam naman ng China na napakalaki niya, napaka-powerful niya, napakayaman niya. So ano ba naman? Bigyan tayo ng konting barya dito, konting concession dito. Kaso hindi ho tayo parunong eh. What has former President Duterte taught us? that by sending our public servants in the foreign affairs to overcome their functional illiteracy and stop serving as lazy and corrupt lawyers for the gringos, they can work instead at diplomacy and bilateral negotiations. Simple lamang po. And as the spokesman in Beijing has even made it more simple when he said, those who play with fire perish by it. Maraming salamat.
Danny, let's go into a bit of a discussion with our reactors as
Yeah.
well as your own contribution to the discussion. Would you like to start it off with your own insights?
Yes, thank you,
Yes,
Kado.
please, Danny.
And thank you, Kamentong. Yes, I'd just like to give my some of my observations and my reflections on this recent election, midterm election in 2025 that just took place this week, May 12, 2025. So far, the final tally of the winners for the senators, final and official data based on the COMELEC server. We have Bongo, number 1, who is the most voted senator in election history, with 27 million votes. We have Bam Aquino with 20 million votes, Bato de la Rosa with 20 million votes, Erwin Tulfo with 17 million votes, Kiko Pangilinan with 15 million votes, Rodante Marcoleta with 15 million votes as well, Ping Lacson, Tito Soto, Pia Cayetano, Camille Villar, Lito Lapid, and finally Amy Marcos, who placed number 12. A few observations I'd like to share. First, I think we must, people who value the sanctity and the legitimacy of the elections, we must call for an audit and a manual recount of all of the votes. As even the COMELEC has even reported, there are 18 million overvotes, most of them from the party lists. An overvote means the ACM, or the electronic counting machine, has not registered a voter's vote in the ballot of their shade. This actually happened to my father when we were voting. Thankfully, I had experienced no problems. But my father, he voted for Duterte Youth Party list, and he shaded the only one. He knew that you only have to shade, you must only shade one, otherwise it would be null and void. And still, when he presented his ballot to the electronic counting machine, it registered as overvoted. So he was disenfranchised on that regard. But thankfully, his senators were counted. So I would like to call for a full manual audit and recount of the votes, because there are legitimate concerns of irregularities, especially overvotes that the COMELEC even has acknowledged, with 18 million overvotes. This is concerning because in the last election, senatorial midterm election in 2019, there were only 1 million overvotes. Now there are 18 million. So this is not just an isolated incident. And those who value the democracy, the sanctity of our votes in this democratic system, allegedly, we must call for a full recount. But in spite of the irregularities, many of the PDP Laban candidates, of which we are in full support, did very well. For example, Attorney Jimmy Bondoc placed at finally at the final tally. He was number 17. He actually surpassed Senator Manny Pacquiao, which is not bad for a first-time run. The other observation that I want to share is that all of Bongbong Marcos's party, the Partito Federal, lost. That is Benhur Abalos, who spent many hundreds of millions in ads. Manny Pacquiao also lost, and Francis Tolentino Escado has just presented. Parang hindi umubra yung anti-China gimmick niya. with all of the hearings that he conducted in aid of I view as election, but it did not work. Longtime Senators Bong Revilla also lost. Willie Revilla may also lost, showing that the trend of in past Philippine elections of star power and celebrities that it doesn't win anymore. Celebrity names used to guarantee votes, not this year. As I mentioned, Revilla, Pacquiao, Revilla May, Salvador, and even Ben Tulfo, the other one, the brother, all lost. Another observation is that the two candidates that were running for senator this year perceived as being pro-China, but in reality, they just favored independent foreign policy and strategic comprehensive partnership with China, which is what the rest of our neighbors in ASEAN and Southeast Asia are doing. Attorney Rodante Marcoleta, who has an upset in this election, upset victory, surpassing even establishment candidates like Tito Soto. Attorney Rodante Marcoleta will also be fighting for the electricity issue. He has 5 bills nakabinbin doon sa Congress, and it did not move forward kasi yung 19 Congress really focus talaga nila politika hindi yung basic needs ng tao ayon sa mga survey. And if we look at the survey that was conducted by WR Numero, the official survey firm partner of ABS-CBN, the results of this election reflected that survey, which found that ayon sa survey, majority of the Philippines, majority of the country is Duterte pa rin dahil yung nakita nila WR Numero sa survey nila, yung mga taga-suporta ng mga Duterte at kanilang mga kaalyado is at 40%. Yung mga independent or wala sa mga nabanggit, 31.4%. Yung mga taga-suporta ng mga Pinklawan, mga Dilaw at mga kakamping ni Lenny Robredo, ni Risa Hontiveros at iba pa nilang mga kaalyado was at 15%, at yung mga taga-suporta ng mga Marcos at kanilang mga kaalyado 13.6%. So the official vote count seems to reflect this survey that the majority political bloc in the country are still the DDS or the diehard Duterte supporters. The another observation I found was that all of the politicians who were running for local and national elections lost. Those politicians who went after Vice President Sara Duterte, who went after her the most in the Quadcom hearings in Congress, in the hearings in aid of legislation, in the budget hearings, for example, Benny Abante lost in his race in Manila. Stella Kimbo lost in Marikina. Dan Fernandez lost in Pampanga in his race for governor. Laguna. Of course, the ex-senator Antonio Trillanes lost for his race mayorship race in Caloocan. Franz Castro, of course, lost her race for senator. And of course, the very good news is that Makabayan Bloc won 0 seats in the Senate, as well as the Bayan Muna is no longer in the House of Representatives. Their party list was soundly rejected by the people, as well as Pam Baricaturo, as Camentong mentioned earlier, another upset victory. And she was interviewed by Karen Davila, where she said that her victory, Pam's victory, Governor-elect Pam's victory, is due to the support of the Dutertes, and the Duterte magic is still very much alive. American media, international media, has taken notice of they have documented the overwhelming defeat of the Marcos, the incumbent administration. An article by Bloomberg, which was published on May 12, 2025, with the headline, Sara Duterte allies outperform in race for Philippine Senate. And another headline by the same Bloomberg, Duterte's outperform in Philippine midterms in blow to Marcos. And of course, another headline from the Manila Times: Duterte's triumphant, Marcos is, their words not mine, Marcos is screwed. So it goes to show that, and most of the Alianza candidates of Marcos, they won not because of Marcos's backing or endorsement. For Abalos, Pacquiao, and Tolentino, it seemed to be the kiss of death. Some of those Alianza candidates that did win, like Tito Soto and Ping Lacson, they already had established a name of their own. Some final observations. The DDS machine is still undefeated. It is now the most dominant voter base in Philippine history, and it's just warming up. The voters are angry, and they made their voices heard in the ballot box. And that is great to see. But one thing is very concerning, we have to monitor, because we see an element of foreign intervention, again, this time by the Americans, by the Europeans, and by the communist terrorists. Because there was a headline in the Manila Times that reported the words of attorney Cristina Conti, who ran actually as the 5th representative of Bayan Muna, who was soundly rejected in this election. She said that 2 of the top PDP candidates who won in the election, Senators Bongo and Bato de la Rosa, who both got 27 million, 20 to 21 million votes respectively. She says that they are likely to face trial before the International Criminal Court, which is ridiculous and actually an affront to democracy, because 20 million people voted for Go and Bato, and this is an attempt to disenfranchise them by someone, Cristina Conti, of the now very much known CPP-NPA above ground organization Bayan Muna. It's ironic she talks about human rights when, Bongo, or as the normal people will call him, Mr. Malasakit. His Malasakit centers have served 17 million Filipinos with medical and financial needs. Whereas the CPP-NPA terrorists have taken the lives of over 50,000 or more Filipino civilians, police and military. So that is one element we have to watch out for, this foreign intervention in our election. Finally, on the impeachment, the Alianza campaign manager himself, Toby Chanco, has admitted that the push for impeachment is why many of the Alianza candidates underperform. And even Ping Lacson said that they talagang nilampaso talaga sila because of their support for the impeachment. Speaking of impeachment, we suddenly see this collaboration now, very public collaboration of the Speaker Martin Romualdez with the so-called opposition candidates that won in the party list system in ML party list and Akbayan, represented by the former Senator Laila de Lima and 2 or 3-time senatorial candidate Attorney Chel Jokno, which is ironic because they're yellow and they're anti-Marcos, anti-Romualdez back then, and now they're collaborating with Romualdez to impeach and convict the vice president. They will be serving as prosecutors. But what was interesting is, yesterday it was reported in the media that former Akbayan representative Walden Bello was warning these 2 people, without De Lima and Jokno, without mentioning by name, that they should think first before joining the prosecution team in the Senate against the vice president, because it risks, the risk is it would entangle them in a dynastic struggle, distracting them from what they were elected to do, which is to represent the sector of their party list. In this case, they were just engaging in politics, not defending the interests of the sector they were supposed to represent in the election. Finally, the most impressive electoral victory was the Duterte Youth Party List. I am a proud supporter and campaigner of them. They received 2.2 million votes. This is an amazing feat because they did not have any political machinery. No ayuda, hindi binabudbud ng ayuda, walang vote buying, walang artistang endorser, walang television ad, walang radio ad, walang malaking billboards, EDSA, and yet they were able to pull off that victory, placing at number 2 at the party list results. Finally, the star, it seems that the vice president is safe for now at the impeachment, things can change because there's no honor. So a friend of mine said there's no honor among thieves. Scado mentioned that he sees that there are 10 senatoriables who will be voting to acquit the vice president. She needs only 9 to be acquitted to survive the impeachment trial, and the trial would need 16 votes from the senators, 16 convict votes, and I think we have the numbers. Ascado has mentioned the names of the senators earlier. But the final surprise was, of course, the final surprise of this election was that many people are beginning to see that they are voting based on their needs. Whether we voted for them or not, the top 5 candidates represent some of it really mirrors what the Pulse Asia surveys were saying are the top concerns of the Filipino people. Not a single one of them, if you see the candidates that won, are related to China. Because the number one, according if the official COMELEC results are to go by, Bongo was voted number 1 because he was seen as the person who provided the needs of the people as it relates to healthcare, the malasakit centers. But Makino, the perception is with the free college law, education, Bato de la Rosa, kaliwat kanan na yung krimen ngayon at yung droga, so he was voted in as the tapang and the kamay na bakal and the war on drugs to represent that. And the fourth one is, of course, Tulfo, which many of us did not vote for, but he represents this swift justice that the police and the courts have not been delivering very much during this administration. And finally, with Rodante Marcoleta, who is fighting for electricity sector, which ayon doon sa survey na 85% in the residents of Metro Manila, 85% of their expenses go to electricity, and Attorney Rodante Marcoleta is the only one in the Congress, in the 19th Congress now, graduating to be in the 20th Congress in the Senate to fight against the oligarchs who have been robbing us for decades. So people are beginning to vote in line with their interests, and we can clearly see that based on the senators who are the top 5 in this election, that the issue is not China, the issue is not xenophobia, the using of China as a distraction from the domestic problems of the country has failed, and Ascado has said earlier, this is a victory for sovereignty, and I think the Filipino people slowly by slowly are beginning to wake up, and hopefully this trend will continue. Thank you very much.
Danny, that's a very, very comprehensive, very, very thorough analysis and evaluation. And I hope our new senators and congressmen and the rest of the nation will be guided by the major lesson here. As you said, it is not xenophobia that guides the interests of the nation, of the people. It is not the anti-China issue, but it is the national needs. But one thing I will add is, of course, it was a sense of injustice against President Rodrigo R. Duterte that really spurred all this. And my concern is how we can translate this into a focus on the economy. Because as you can see, the national discussion is
Politics.
practically totally bereft of economic discussions, which is one of the major problems that we have. We have a raised hand from Iloilo.
Yes, Mr. Sir Celso Coenglet, please unmute, or we'd like to recognize you.
Yeah, Celso? Yeah, good. Laksan natin audio sandali, Celso. Okay. Yeah, okay now.
Two things. Number one is not for the mass TV. It would have been more good than 10 senators. But that is still moving travel right now. the allies, if ever the impeachment will push through, still do not know how they will vote because I know one of the senators there and I don't know about the others, but they might do an et tu Brutus, you know. And that leads me to my second point. There's an emerging legal opinion right now, although Kaado mentioned that in passing, that the impeachment was done by the 19th Congress, by the previous Congress, so it cannot be acted upon. Although the trick there is that the Senate is a continuing institution, but Attorney Lambino is planning to file a petition to the Supreme Court that since only 12 senators were left, it's not a majority, so it cannot be a continuing education. I believe this petition of Attorney Lambino will be our first line of defense against the impeachment of VP Sara because, as I said, we cannot still be sure how the allies would vote if ever the impeachment will push through. But even though because the new Congress will convene on the fourth Monday of July. So in his calculation, there's no time because they still have to make the rules, ask President Sara to answer. So there's no time. And as Kaado mentioned, there's a rule that you cannot file an impeachment within a year. So they have to do that after February 5, 2026. Nonetheless, we should also rally the Duterte 10 senators who want to support in the Senate to support this legal opinion of Attorney Lambino, and for us also to support his Supreme Court petition. Thank you very much.
Tapos na, Celso?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, any reaction? By the way, how was the voting in Iloilo City?
Well, Iloilo is a yellow country. Na talagang sina Bam, sina Kiko, which is impossible. The Duterte 10 did not fare well here because Iloilo is a yellow country and the ABS-CBN country.
Okay. Any other points, Kaado and Danny?
Yes, I think what Celso Penglat is saying is correct. We really have to go legal and challenge some of the results because there's no way some of the votes. I saw some reports, OFW votes that were counted. Doesn't seem mathematically possible. For example, you have Attorney Jimmy Bondo, PDP Laban in OFW votes from I think Saudi. He received 600,000 while Abalos got 800,000. So it doesn't seem to make any sense. If you look at the trends, if you look at the OFWs, they all vote for PDP. Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japan, in the Emirates. But then suddenly nakalusot nakataas tong si Abalos. So that has to be really challenged.
There is a demand for recount by senatorial candidate Kibuloy, for example.
Yes, not just recount Kamentong, but it has to be an audit because we don't know if these are people from real addresses or real people, so it has to be an audit.
But the point I wanted to make in mentioning that is if we had manual voting and precinct counting and just electronic transmission, then we would not have this problem. So this is really a question that the new Senate and the new Congress should be tackling, and we will be pushing our petition to, since we have been campaigning since 2010
For hybrid.
for hybrid voting and counting. Well, we can move on. We also note that Edmund Pancha is with us from Tuguegarao City. Unless he raises his hand, we'll go on to the next topic. We don't have Benjamin Contreras begged off for a while because of a previous appointment. So we'll get back to the provincial reactors natin. Maybe I can already start presenting my paper. Danny?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Kaado. Thank you to Castle Sokainglet for the reaction. Now let's of course welcome Kamintong Laurel to give his presentation on the the trading system of the world and stability of the Philippine economy and the push for a multilateral trade in the age of protectionism. Let us welcome Kamintong Laurel for his presentation.
Well, the main theme of this discussion is the multilateral trading system that is in crisis today, but it is the advocacy of the multilateral trading system that can provide the world economy with stability. I added some focus on the Philippine aspects of this concern, and therefore I have my separate title for the paper I prepared, not a very long one, focused on the retreat of the US in this trade and tariff confrontation with China. Actually, it is really with China, while China actually is not just one up, but two up now, and the Philippines continues to be facing oblivion in the economy because of its being forsaken by its national leadership in the economic realm. I will begin with a slide I picked up from various sources of the American press, and this controversy in the US based on President Trump's interview with one of the major channels in the United States, where he tried to explain his position on this matter of the tariff war with the rest of the world and not just China. He tried to explain that American girls this Christmas should not expect 30 dolls, but maybe $2 would be sufficient. And that is a center of the dilemma of the American social and economic milieu. So my first segment is, for the love of dolls, the US has taken a second retreat. The first one was the first 90-day pause in the tariff that gave exemptions to China's computer and smartphone exports to the United States. So it has taken a second retreat in its trade and tariff war with China and the world. Don't forget, while China and the US are in a tariff war, the US is in a tariff war with the rest of the world, not just China. While China is in a tariff war only with the US and not the rest of the world. And well, the United States and China went to the Swiss mountains to meet the American delegation went to the Swiss mountains to meet the Chinese delegation and agreed to a massive climb down of US tariffs from 145% to 30% of Chinese imports, while retaining its first tariff retreat exceptions in computers and smartphones. China is, for the second time, one up again in the challenge of the century, started by the United States to determine which of the two nations shall shape the economic and technological future of humanity, because at stake really in this struggle is who will set the standards for the future of the world economy, who will set the standards for vehicles, transportation, electricity, power, and so on. Just like, for example, why is the Philippines using 220 volts? Because we are under the American system. Why is Hong Kong using the 110 volts? Because Hong Kong was under the British and European system. Why is Japan using right-handed drive in vehicles and the Philippines using left-handed? Because we are under the Americans, and Japan, when it established its industrial policy, it was a sovereign country. So that is what is at stake, and that is why the struggle is very intense. But at this point, I can add that China has the advantage because it has the right leadership that knew what to do with its massive advantage in scale, because this is an aspect of the two economies that have not been discussed much. China is a 1.4 million population with a huge country, and the US is only one-fourth of its size in population, although much, much better endowed in natural resources. But the Chinese leadership understood what to do to make its scale not a problem but an advantage in the global economy. It spent massively, invested massively in the development of the society, in the education of its people, that in 3 generations it has propelled a feudal country into one of the top, if not the top economies of the present world. And well, we will explain what the problem with the US economy has been for the past generation. So China is one up again in the challenge of the century started by the United States to determine which of the two nations shall shape the economic and technological future of humanity. Despite US unilateralism and bullying of all nations, China, on the other hand, has consistently proposed a quote-unquote shared future for mankind, a collective human community, the multipolar world where multilateral trade rules dominate and guide the trading relations of all nations. So I'm pointing out the contrast between the attitude of the two major economies of the world. America first, which at the very core defines interest as national interest, while China defines interest as common interest, common not only of the Chinese people, but common with humanity. So this is an important guidance from the Chinese perspective, because the world is now a very, very close community brought about by the threat of nuclear Armageddon, if we only think of the self-interest of each nation. China is espousing the common interest. Next is weapons for dolls. China, President Trump has just been to the Middle East. And what did he bring home from the Middle East? Well, the next slide explains it all. Weapons industry cheers as Trump inks Saudi $142 billion arms deal. So I entitled this Weapons for Dolls. So sell more weapons to get more dolls for the American little girls in this coming Christmas. In a vain attempt to afford dolls for its children while talking peace, the U.S. peddles arms and weapons instead, as exemplified by the latest sale of U.S. armaments to Saudi Arabia. The arms sales is affected even as Trump bestows recognition to the new terrorist leadership of Syria that is busy preparing and deploying new ethnic terrorists on U.S. targets across the world, including Asia. They have also Uyghurs in the Syrian community of the Takfiris, and consults with allied Arab states for the next steps on the Gaza and Iran dilemma. Come Christmas 2025, dolls will be too dear for the US or American children. President Trump's supposed aspirant for the Nobel Peace Prize has jacked up the US 2025 defense budget to $1 trillion, an 18% increase over last year's approximately $850 million defense allocation. This early, the Eurasian Report news platform and other geopolitical news sites have reported, quote, unprecedented, unquote, deployment in China's backyard as the U.S. significantly expands military presence in Indo-Pacific region, especially in the Philippines. Here in the Philippines, we are just witness to the latest defense treaty that the Philippines is signing with Germany from tens of thousands of miles away from the Philippines, from the Indo-Pacific. The United States still cannot comprehend that times are changing and that it must realign its economic expectations and values to the emerging normal of a multipolar world whose essential feature is a more competitive trading global milieu that shall gradually equalize standards of living among all nations. So the United States, for example, in Africa, is pouncing on Captain Traore of Burkina Faso, who is liberating not only his own country, but Africa. While China is building the Belt and Road Initiative all over the world, opening ports in Peru to access the imports from Latin America to Asia, as well as deliver goods from Asia to Latin America. The time is past when one single country can use force to have its way, as the common aspiration of global majority is peace and prosperity through cooperation and complementarity. China leads the global march to multilateral trading and peace. Our next slide shows President Xi Jinping at the CELAC meeting in Beijing. CELAC is the Community of Caribbean States and Latin American States. China's Xi Jinping urges countries to stand united in face of the global trade war. China has been leading the global majority, the global south, and the advancing economies of ASEAN to stand together and uphold multilateral trading rules and platforms that were agreed upon by all countries of the United Nations and the World Trade Organization for decades. At the recently concluded meeting of the 33-country Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, in Beijing on May 12, President Xi Jinping reiterated this call. President Xi Jinping called for the countries to stand together to promote global peace and stability, stressing that, quote unquote, there were no winners in tariff wars. He cautioned unilateralist countries that, quote unquote again, bullying or hegemonism only leads to self-isolation. As explained by China's Secretary of State Wang Yi, the CELAC meet is, quote unquote, an opportunity to reflect on the valuable experiences of a decade of mutual benefit and equality to chart the trade course for the next 10 years, unquote. So the next slide shows the CELAC meeting. The next slide shows another aspect of this global leadership China is exercising. This is the 28th ASEAN plus 3 finance ministers and central bank governors meeting held in Italy. It can be recalled that President Xi Jinping's immediate response to the looming trade crisis was a prompt consultation with ASEAN neighbors in mid-April through visits to Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia. Unlike the United States, which was threatening, challenging all countries of the world, China went on to start consultations. All nations consulted reaffirmed their commitments to multilateral trade. China's initiative was expanded further at the meeting on May 4th, 2025 of finance leaders and central bank governors of the ASEAN plus 3, that means plus South Korea and plus Japan, that reiterated their quote-unquote commitment to free multilateral trade. In late 2024, the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC, also reaffirmed, quote-unquote again, the multilateral trade system through the Beijing Action Plan for a universally beneficial, inclusive economic globalization. Together, China and Africa reaffirmed their common commitment to the core values and basic principles of the World Trade Organization, opposing decoupling and disruptions in supply chains, and resisting unilateral actions and protectionism. The Philippines forsaken. I have shown this slide that I have presented several times in several previous forums of ours. This highlights one of the major losses of the Philippines due to the pivot to the United States of Bongbong Marcos in 2023. And what is this? This is the Chinese tourist arrivals to the Philippines, which in 2019 registered 2 million, as this Business World report of January 12, 2025, quoting the Department of Tourism itself, Tourism Secretary Maria Cristina G. Frasco. Tourist arrivals from China fell short of the 2 million projection last year in 2024, if I'm not mistaken, yes, 2024, as the Philippines maintained a visa regime that is stricter than those of its ASEAN neighbors, the Department of Tourism said, citing suspension of the electronic visa scheme for Chinese visitors. Tourism Secretary Maria Cristina Frasco said arrivals from China numbered 312,222 in 2024. Compare this to the 1.9 million during Duterte's time in 2019. That is equivalent to a loss if we just compute the 312,222 in 2024. That is a loss of at least $1.7 billion inflow into the economy, direct cash inflow from Chinese tourist spending. And why did we have to change the electronic visa regime that the late former ambassador to China from the Philippines, Chito Santoromana, instituted? Chito Santoromana's term as ambassador to China under the Duterte administration was processing 7,000 visas a day for Chinese visitors and Chinese tourists to the Philippines. From the latest reports that we get from the Department of Tourism here, we are probably just processing around 300 to 400 visas a day these days. So that is a very, very clear, malinaw na malinaw pong kalugihan po ng bansang Pilipinas dahil doon sa pag-aakap ng administrasyon ni Bongbong Marcos sa Amerika, sa pivot to America, na nakita po natin dito sa eleksyon, walang binibigyang bale, hindi binibigyang bale po ng ating mga mamamayan, ng ating botante. So, we cannot underemphasize this point. We are suffering actual economic, financial losses each and every day already from this embrace of the United States of America by Bongbong Marcos and the initiation, continuation, perpetuation of the anti-China propaganda, anti-China policies under the BBM administration, which is intrinsically anti-multilateralism, that it is just simply following in the tutelage of the American proxy conflict, proxy tension, proxy war program or strategy. So, next slide will show another consequence, dire consequence of this embrace of the Americans. towing the line of the Americans to alienate, decouple from China gradually and slowly, which is actually happening undeclared, but that is what Bongbong Marcos has been doing. That is what Martin Romualdez has been doing in Congress. That is what the Senate under Bongbong Marcos is doing. Decoupling, pinuputol, dahan-dahan po ang ating pakikipagtransaksyon sa China na hindi naman China ang mawawalan po, kundi ang Pilipino. This is just a very, very new report from the Department of Transportation. Under Dizon, the new Secretary of Transportation, who announced that priority projects such as the 257 billion peso railways in Bicol and Mindanao have been delayed for 3 years without an identified source of funding because the Bongbong Marcos administration and all the proxies in media and in the think tanks such as Albert del Rosario Institute, it's highlighted, their campaign is highlighted by the headline of the Inquirer, which is another anti-China newspaper. November 30, 2023, government urged to cancel China funding for infrastructure projects. Who is urging them? Is it the Filipino people? Is it the Bicolanos? Is it the Mindanaoans? Definitely not. And the Bicolanos and the Mindanaoans and the Luzonians, the Visayans have spoken in this election. China is not a threat. China is not an enemy. Malinaw po ang mensahe ng ating botante dito sa midterm election. Yet the government has been campaigning against China projects, not because it is to its interest, but because it is the instruction of the United States of America. And Vince Dizon says this now. There is still no certainty on whether the Marcos administration can break ground during its term for the 257 billion peso railways in Bicol and Mindanao without an identified source of funding, which was already there. The China funding was already there. It was canceled by the Philippine government. Transportation Secretary Vince Dizon told the Star that it is now difficult to fix a timeline for the South Long Haul project in Bicol and the Mindanao Railway project, 1,100 kilometers long circumferential rail, circumferential around the entire island of Mindanao. And the phase 1 alone, from Tagum to Davao City to Digos. Both the SLH and MRP were supposed to be financed by official development assistance from China. But President Marcos withdrew the loan application in 2023 for lack of progress. What lack of progress? Ambassador Huang Xilian reiterated that this credit line, this ODA credit line, is still there up to the very last minute. So we are already losing not only cash from Chinese tourists, but projects that are direly needed. Alam naman po ng mga Bicolano kung gaano kasama po ang pagbabiyahe po sa South Road from Laguna down to Bicol. From Quezon down to Bicol. The Philippine government recently sent a trade team of negotiators led by Secretary Frederick Go, the Special Assistant to the President for Investment and Economic Affairs, or SAPIIEA, to meet with the U.S. Trade Representative in Washington to discuss the Philippines' position on the reciprocal tariff crisis. Upon its return, the trade team could only report that, quote-unquote, talks went very well, without mentioning any tangible achievement. Since then, the BBM government has simply gone silent on the matter. What is the arrangement with the United States of America on this reciprocal tariff situation? What I keep reporting, for the past 3 years, the Philippine government has been seeking a free trade agreement with the United States of America, and this has been openly denied and declared by former U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai, if I'm not mistaken in the name, that U.S. cannot consider, will not consider such free trade agreement. So we're getting nothing from the United States of America. Unlike other ASEAN countries and the global majority that have reached clear lines of agreement with the leader of the global multilateral trading advocacy community, the Philippines is neither here nor there, even as its government continues to drown in US-induced internal political conflagration, self-eviscerating in a national culture of corruption propagated by the prevailing regime that the recent electoral upset hopes to neutralize. So I go now to the conclusion: multilateral trading system for peace and prosperity. Since its inception in 1995, the World Trade Organization has expanded trade between developing economies by 9.7% per year, enabling these countries to move from less than 1/10 of the global trade in 1995 to 25% in 2022, reaching a total value of 6.1 trillion US dollars. It may be imperfect, but it has certainly assisted in the growth of the developing nations. This is particularly true for China, India, and Brazil, and Indonesia, who have experienced monumental economic development. Playing by the rules, the global majority progressed steadily while the US reaped the benefits of cheap imports from nations the world over. Unfortunately for the United States, financialization of its economy and relocation of its corporations to countries with low labor costs resulted in its own deindustrialization. Now, what is financialization? In America, finance became more profitable than manufacturing. And manufacturing became more profitable outside of the United States in low labor cost countries. So it's really that simple. Today, the United States has found a convenient scapegoat in the WTO, World Trade Organization. An ironic twist, as the US has long been sabotaging the World Trade Organization by blocking the appointment of new judges to the latter's appellate body that could have resolved long-standing trade disputes. Instead, the World Trade Organization is at a standstill. While the incoming PDP Laban senators who are guided by the independent foreign policy Duterte legacy, the two allies endorsed, including the two allies endorsed by the VP Sara and incumbent quote-unquote independent senators, the Philippines has a new opportunity in the 20th Senate to make a determined push to restore the mandate and exercise of the independent foreign policy and return the country towards a genuine multilateral trading system. Okay, that's my paper, and so if there are any questions, it is not as exciting as the political analysis and evaluation, but let's read some comments from YouTube. Cecil Lagdaan. Can Mr. Danny Long enlighten us on why he sides with Bam Aquino, and he seems to agree that he is the one responsible to the free tertiary program? Can you clarify that?
Okay. Thank you for that question. I believe that it was a group effort. Everyone deserves the credit, especially President Rodrigo Duterte and Senator-elect, number one Senator-elect Bongo. Many people do not know this, but it was President Duterte who a law has to be fully funded, and President Duterte tasked his government economic managers to look for funds to fund the free college tuition law, because there was not enough money in the government to fund it. So he tasked them to look for excess funds in non-performing agencies, and those funds were to be allocated to fund the free college program. Of course, the taxpayers are ultimately to be thanked for that, because when we're talking about free programs, free irrigation or free college, it is paid for by the Filipino taxpayer. As to my position on Bam Aquino, he was the principal sponsor of the law in the Senate. Many senators like to claim credit when they by saying they're the principal author of this and that law. But actually, being a principal author means very little, especially if you're not a lawyer. We all know that the staff of the senators write the laws, not the senator themselves. But being a principal sponsor is way more challenging and much more difficult, because one has to really defend the law in plenary against yung mga pilosopo na senator colleagues. So that you really see who actually knows what they're talking about. That's just my view.
Yeah, there's a
This was yesterday. So that's Bam Aquino. He seems to be a very moderate and centrist figure. He went on this popular TV show, Showtime. Then he went on to say that he gives credit to President Duterte for for passing the free college show. Kasi yung pinsan niya, yung panahon ng pinsan niya pa yun hindi napasa during Noy Noy, the late Noy Noy. But it was actually it was Bam who even revealed in an interview that there were 2 to 3 new liberal cabinet secretaries, namely Ben Jokno and Sonny Carlos Dominguez, that almost influenced PRRD to block the free college tuition law because, if you're a neoliberal, you don't want the government to be involved in public services.
But there's a clarification I want to make about this free education, and I don't know if our technician Josh can access and retrieve the discussion slide that I have presented several times, where at least 40% of our tertiary college free college students drop out. Because this may be very nice to hear that you have free college education, but it is the fundamental economic issues that are more pressing for our people. So, well, you have very many decorative legislation from Congress, such as senior citizens discount, which really punishes the small and micro industries selling in restaurants and so on. So 4 in 10 Filipino college students dropping out despite free tuition law. And this is an important point. And Bam Aquino should not be too proud about that free education, universal free education, and so on. And that's why I wanted to remind everybody that it's the economy. Sabi nga ni Clinton in the campaign against Bush ba yun at that time?
Bush.
It's the economy, stupid. And yan po ang isang dahilan kung bakit gustong-gusto ng mga oligarko sa Pilipinas, yung mga Manny Pangilinan at mga dyaryo nila, yung mga Philippine Star, puro politika ang gusto nilang halu-haluin, at yan lang po ang mapansin po ng sambayanan, at makalimutan po ang economic issues, which I will reiterate, just the most important of which is our electricity cost, which is 30% higher than Thailand, 50% higher than Vietnam, 60 to 70% higher than China. And so, sinong mamumuhunan dito kung di lang po mamumuhunan sa electricity sector, dahil po katakot-takot ang tubo po nila dyan. Well, anyway, that's a note to clarify po the priorities really that we must pay attention to. And may nagtaas daw ng kamay ka, Joshua. Let's take a look.
Take a look.
Si Celso ulit. Yeah, Celso.
Yes, Caselso, please unmute anytime.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Kami just would like to share something personal, personal experience, heartbreaking experience that happened recently. I have a Filipino friend who had been doing business with the Chinese, and recently he called me looking for a supplier for durian. So I called my friends in Mindanao, particularly in Davao, that we need durian. And good enough, they said we can supply. And however, after some time, when things are almost ready, my Filipino friend told me that according to his Chinese contact, there is a marching order from the Chinese government not to do business with the Philippines. So they went to Thailand instead, which actually the price of durian in Thailand is much cheaper than the Philippines. During Pinoy's time, this also happened because I had Filipino Chinese friend who told me during Pinoy's time that there was also a marching order from the Chinese government not to do business with the Philippines. You know, this is very sad, no? And I believe this can only change if Bongbong Marcos is replaced. Thank you, Kamento.
Can we request Edmund Pancha to raise his hand so that we'll just get the feedback from him? Edmund, are you available? Let me see. Kasi madalas may problema ata ang internet nila doon eh. Okay, I cannot see the hand, Joshua. But anyway, habang hinihintay natin kung sakali.
Can I say
Yeah.
join there?
Yes, Kado.
I mean, was it last year, Carmento, when we had the roundtable discussion with some of the Chinese embassy officials, precisely because we were looking for reasons why the Chinese tourists are not coming in. The Chinese investments seem to be getting distracted, and the infrastructures were being short of being sabotaged. And I think it's about time that we Filipinos really come up to, ano ba talaga, mahal ba natin talaga ang bayan natin? Yung mga policy makers. Kasi nakausap ko rin recently, Kamento, itong senatorial candidate na si Raul Lambino. At isa pala siya sa mga naging abogado ng mga subsidiaries ng Korean shipbuilding company dyan sa Subic Town, no? Sa Subic. Alam niyo mga kabansa, nung panahon, no? Nung mga Koreano, sila nagtayo ng planta ron. They had 30,000 employees. Ngayon, yung nagpapatakbo dyan ngayon only have 2,000 employees. So, nagka-curious ako. Ano ba nangyari dito? And in one of my discussions with the former defense secretary during the time of President Duterte, and as confirmed by Raul Lambino, nagkaroon daw ng change in the terms of reference doon sa financial aspect. Dahil binibenta na ng mga Koreano yung planta nila sa Subic. At yung pagpalit ng terms of reference, dahil doon, umurong ang mga Chino sa bidding. Sinisimplify ko lang ang presentation, no, for the layman. At parang naluto para mapunta ito sa Cerberus, which is an Australian-American company. Sabi ko nga sa kanya, bakit natin, I was talking with the editorial we, no? Hindi ko naman tinuturo. Bakit natin pinakawalan itong opportunity na ito? Nag-i-employ ng 30,000 ngayon, 2,000 na lang. Bakit na prejudice ang Chinese interest dito? I'm not lawyering for China, no? But the realities face us eye to eye to the fact that China in 2024 controls 56% of the shipbuilding industry in the entire world. Tapos itong mga Koreano, they control 21%. And Japan, ang laki-laki ng Japan, ha? 8.9% lang. So pag inad mo yung 56, 21 at 9%, 86% kontrolado lang ng tatlong bansa. 86%. Chinek ko ang projection ng China sa shipbuilding industry nila for next year. This year to next year. They are projecting to grow from 56% to 62%. So pag inat mo sa total na 86% present market shares ng tatlong bansa, yung 6%, 92% na ang kontrolado ng tatlo. Natitira na lang sa ibang bansa, including Australia at saka Amerika, ay 8%. Hindi ako negosyante. Ha? Pero sasabihin ko sa inyo, abot ng aking talino na kung China ang ating pinakner dyan sa Subic, baka hindi lamang 30,000 na nai-employ dyan ngayon. Baka 100,000 na. Bakit? Kontrolado ng China ang shipbuilding. Primarily because of the Belt and Road Initiative. Kanina sinabi ni Carmentong ng port development. Pag nagde-develop ka ng port, nag-increase ka ng trade, kailangan mo ng more and more shipping. At ang China, talagang naghahanap yan. Existing na yung facility natin. Kung nabigyan man lang tayo ng China, ng miskin na 5% ng market share niya dahil sila nagpapatakbo ng shipbuilding natin sa Subic, doble na ho ang employment noong, Hanjin. From 30,000 before to 60,000. At least po Hanjin, baka magpagawa pa dyan later on dahil hindi sila nalugi. Yan ang sinasabi ko eh. Meron tayong depekto sa ating mind processing. Meron tayong depekto sa ating policy making. Napapasukan lang masyadong politika para makinabang lamang ang ilan, maybe because dahil nagkapalitan ng pera in the transaction with the Americans and the Australians. Why would I say that the prospect of corruption was so big? Ito ang facts na sinasuggest ko. Oh. Ikaw ba? Kung ano? Kanino ka pupunta? Siyempre doon sa pinakamalaki market. Hindi ka pupunta sa niwala sa 8% yung Australians at saka American shipbuilding. And by the way, Kamento, this reflects on the U.S. capacity to improve its Navy in the next maybe 5 to 10 years. At the rate China is doing. So pati doon, pag in-extend mo yun, grabe. Pangalawa, example ko, ang tunay na ginto ay nandoon sa joint oil and gas exploration sa Reed Bank. With China undertaking the feasibility studies, the technology, the equipment, and the funding to extract the resources. Kung mature lang tayo sa ating political science at sa ating pananaw sa soberanya, Hindi natin ang soberanya kung hindi naman ito makakain ng taong bayan. Kung ang nagpapakamatay tayo dyan sa pangalan ng soberanya, pero nagugutom naman 63% ng ating bansa. Sabi niya, kaya nga ang taong bayan, sabi niya, oy, 5% lang yan sovereignty. 5 lang yan. Ito, Cebu, ekonomiya, 72%. Trabaho, 70%. But sovereignty is not even an issue here. If we mature the transaction, elevating it into a treaty that is supra to our internal laws. Kaya nga yung desisyon ni Teddy Boy Locsin, kine-question natin kamentong na si Teddy Boy Locsin, eto, traitor ka, Teddy Boy Locsin. Abogado ka pa naman. Pero hindi ka makapakibabaw sa soberanya. Hindi mo mabitawan yung soberanya. Samantalang, kung itataas mo yan sa level ng international law, at hindi mo itatrato ng service contractor lang at China, kundi treaty partner. Just like how Timor-Leste, napakaliit na bansa, was able to transact it not just with one other country, which is Australia, but with 2 countries pa, Australia and Indonesia. Nakaroon sila ng tripartite. treaty. Hindi nila kinamutan ang soberanya. Ibinabalang nila para maitaas at matuloy yung proyekto. Dahil yung proyektong yun ang magpapakain sa populasyon. Hindi ba kumuha ito si Teddy Boy Locsin na international law? Alam po ninyo, yung produkto niyang reed bank na yan can be in the market. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kamento. In just 4 to 5 years down the road. And as China has proposed, the Philippines will get 60% of the juice. Can you imagine? Kanila lahat. Tapos, paglabas ng juice, 40 lang sila. 60 tayo. Ayaw pa natin. Kaya mga kabansa, kailangan lamang talaga mag-master tayo ng courage and determination to protect deals like this and joint ventures, no? From greedy white Anglo-Saxon Protestants and our homegrown oligarchs. Namimihasa rin mga yan eh. Itong kumuloy na hinahanap natin kada buwan pagdating ng electric bill is the same boat. Dahil itong joint oil and exploration hanggang ngayon ay pangarap pa rin. Samantalang dapat ito na ang dahilan para magkaroon yung free tuition na yan, para magkaroon ng ngipin at huwag na mag-drop out ang mga tao. Bakit nag-drop out ang mga tao? Kasi imbis na mag-aral, nagtatrabaho na lang para makapagdagdag ng pera sa kita ng pamilya. Kaya ngayon, hindi na ho, pwedeng dalawa lang ang nagtatrabaho sa isang pamilya. Kailangan 3-4 na. Pero kung meron tayong sarili na nito at 60% ang share natin, abay para ho tayong Brunei, para ho tayong Sabah, para ho tayong itong mga mabubunying Arab countries. At the end of the year, may tunay na ayuda. Hindi lamang yung mga kasama sa politika, kundi each and every family that comprise the entirety of the population. Because yung sobrang kita, binibigay ho nila na ayuda. Whether you are employed or not. So mga respective families. Hindi dahil kayo ay liberal, hindi dahil kayo ay nationalista, hindi dahil kayo ay Partido Federal or PDP lamang. Hindi po, pantay-pantay. Lahat. Because why? Hindi lamang absolute sovereign ng taong bayan. They are the absolute stockholders of this corporation called Philippines Incorporated. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's read the message from Ed Pancha from Tubigaraw. Ed, natulog yung free college education nung time ni Pinoy
That's true.
dahil hindi nila mapopondohan. It was only during the time of FPRRD, former President Rodrigo R. Duterte, that he prioritized the funding yata. That's why Duterte was the answer to the law. So, yan po. Okay, and from Kenji, masyadong malakas si Sara, delikado pag bumangga. Okay. 3 years na lang si BBM, delikado sila kay Sara kahit anong gawin nila, dapat diyan hayaan nila mga DU30. Eh kung si Bongbong lang nasusunod, palagay ko papayag siya. Hindi lang papayag Amerikano na siyang may hawak po nung sa Tagalog yung leash ng aso. Tali.
Talikala.
Ha?
Talikala.
Tanikala, well, kadenang tanikala. Okay. Let's see from YouTube reactions po. Sobra tayong nadaya sa eleksyon. PDP should have been landslide, sabi ni Dean Tasio Del Mar on trade, reciprocity and fairness in trading to fit the vision of shared progress and development for humanity. Okay, and sabi ni Ralph Recto, sabi dito, Ralph Recto is the principal author, but there are also other senators like Bam Aquino who were co-authors. But as I said, maraming mga legislators, magagandang gagawing batas, wala namang supportive and systemic support for the real implementation of the nice law.
Kaya sa Amerika, Carmento, pagka wala kang funding source, hindi mo pwede ipatay yung batas. Kailangan maghanap ka muna ng paghuhugutan.
Okay, anything else? I think
May message si Tasio Del Mar, gusto ko lang basahin.
which one then?
Captain. At kaado, hawak kasi ng mga opisyal natin ng foreign power. Kunwari lang may soberanya tayo. Kailangan natin ang isang Captain Ibrahim Traore.
That's right. Well, maybe Sara Duterte can be the Traore of the Philippines.
Yes.
Oh, enlisted personnel yun eh. Reserve war.
Colonel.
Sa colonel.
So let me repeat for those who are not familiar with Captain Traore, siya ay nag-coup laban sa gobyernong hawak ng Frances. At pagkatapos niya ng coup, ni-nationalize niya ang gold mining industry. At yung ginto na binebenta nila na tamang halaga na po ngayon, ay inuukol niya yung mga kita doon sa development ng bansa. Ang bansang Burkina Faso ni Captain Traore, which has only 25 million population, already has its electric vehicle manufacturing in joint venture with China po. Something that the Philippines with 120 million people still does not have an electric vehicle industry. So, ganyan po, with the right leadership, bigla pong pagbabago ng bansa po natin. That is why I am...
Isa pa kay Ibrahim Traore. Nung nabisto niya na yung mga nagbibid doon sa public works, ay patong-patong dahil kurap yung system.
Microphone.
No? Kurap yung system. Ang ginawa niya, ang ginamit ng workforce ay yung military. Which we can also
Utilize, yeah.
Di ba? Wala namang ginagawa. Nakalaki ng Philippine Army, oh. Wala namang, yung Philippine, wala kayong ginawa. Wala na kayong magawa. Kaya ginagawa nyo na lang, nagpapatrolya kayo sa high seas. Isipin nyo mabuti ang ginagawa nyo. Kung dinodonate nyo na lang yung crudo na ginagastos ninyo, yung diesel, para maglayag yan yung Cabra, yung Teresa Magbanwa, at kung ano-ano dyan, yung Apolinario Mabini, at saka yung Emilio Jacinto ninyo, at saka yung Gregorio del Pilar ninyo. Bakit hindi nyo na lang i-donate yung krudo sa mga fishermen? Para sila makapaglayang na mas malayo. Meron akong thesis tungkol dyan, pero sa ibang okasyon na muna yun.
Actually, maganda din ang point ni Tasha Delmar dito. Hopefully, ay may Marcos will request your presence in a Senate hearing on this South China Sea issues. Pagod ng mga tao sa ginagawang sarsuela ng mga chihuahua ng kano sa dagat. Well, si Danny has good relations with the Marcos Committee. We will make it a point really to be lobbying now in the Senate this coming months.
Meron pa siya isang comment. I would strongly suggest to explain once again the term effective control as related to exercising sovereignty. Ito nakuha ko dahil salamat sa Diyos, hindi ako functional literate. Sa testimonya ni Menardo Guevara sa Kongreso. Sa kanya ko nalaman at napatunayan that sovereignty is different from exercising sovereignty. Bakit? Katulad ng Sabah. Ang Sabah does not belong to Malaysia. But Malaysia is exercising sovereignty over Sabah. O yan, Tasha Del Mar, yan ang pinaka-practical na ehemplo. Pangalawang ehemplo ko. We have occupied Pag-asa in 1971. Pero only on the basis of internal law and the principle of terra nullius. Pero meron palang may-ari niyan. At sa aking article sa Asian Century Journal, nilagay ko yung detalya ng history tungkol dyan. Because ang posisyon natin, wala talaga tayong verified historic title sa Pag-asa. But since we are in possession, and by virtue of the Declaration of Conduct, na walang kikilos, status quo lahat, we have been occupying that island since 1971, exercising sovereignty. But that doesn't mean that we have a sovereign title to it. That island is disputed by Vietnam, and China has the earliest claim to it. Pangatlo example, ano ba yung effective control? Yan yung effective control ay isa sa mga modicum ng pag-acquire ng sovereignty. Effective control means the actual occupation, administration, and defense, if necessary, of a given feature. Pero, kung walang taboy sa'yo dyan, by hook or by crook, that is effective control. And in fact, China is very careful, sabi ko nga kanina, in exercising its effective control in the entire South China Sea. Hindi sila nakahari-harian sa buong lugar. Nandun ang kanilang mga istasyon sa mga specific islands na okupado. Dahil nga may status quo tayo sa Declaration of Conduct na walang kikilo since 2002. Walang magkakamkam. Tingnan yung ginawa nila sa Sandy Cay. Pupunta sila ron. Kaya nila yung bandera nila. Pero inukupahan ba nila? Pero nung kinabukasan, nagpunta doon yung mga Pilipino, naglagay nila ng bandera. Kailangan umalis yung mga Pilipino dahil paaligid na yung mga Coast Guard at saka militia vessels ng China. Baka mapahamak pa sila. Kaya umalis sila. So, hindi irresponsable. Dapat nga matuto tayo kung paano i-conduct ng China ang law enforcement niya, ang maritime law enforcement niya. Yung paggamit ho ng China ng water cannon, ng laser, at saka ng sonar, ha? Ay hindi ho atake yan. Those are what you call, and even the Pentagon has it in its own manual, that these are non-lethal weapons, NLW, that are used for law enforcement. So kayo ay na-water cannon, katulad ng pawa-water cannon ng mga demonstrators. Huwag kayo magagalit dahil gusto lang kayo paalisin. Ayaw lang kayo papasok. Ganun lang ho yun. So, yun ang effective control. Now, ano ang mas makabuluhan dito? Hanggat wala hong standing agreement in a dispute between two states, between two coastal states sa South China Sea, kung sino ho ang nag-exercise ng sovereignty, siya ang may poder. Presently. So hanggat hindi yan na-resolve through bilateral negotiation or through a court action by the ICJ or whatever, just like nung mag-away ang Estados Unidos at Netherlands dyan sa Las Palmas Islands sa south of Palawan, ay binigay ho ng ICJ sa Netherlands ang pag-aari. At yan ay naging parte ng Dutch Indonesia. So, meron hong mga patakaran eh. Hindi ho basta na nandiyan ka, it is ours. No. Because sabi ko nga, Sabah does not belong to Malaysia, pero sila nandun eh. At hanggang nandun sila, they will administer that. So, yan ho ang realities. At ang effective control po is more compelling because it's customary international law. Mas mataas po yan kaysa sa mga tratado. Noong tayo ang may effective control sa Scarborough Shoal, wala namang kumukasyon sa atin eh. Hawak na natin eh. Ginagamit pa ng Amerikano na shooting practice. Di ba? Dinadaanan pa ng mga Espanyol, gano'n-gano'n. Wala namang nakahangat ng iba dyan eh. Pero nagkamali tayo, mga kabansa. Sumobra tayo. Yumabang tayo. Nagpipishing lang yung mga 8 Chinese vessels doon. Pinakialaman ng military natin. Kaya kayong mga nasa Armed Forces of the Philippines, huwag kayong magmamalaki sa taong bayan, ha? Dahil hanggang ngayon, wala pa kayong pruweba na kaya nyo ang kinikilos nyo. Dahil sa kamay ninyo na wala ang Pugad Island noong 1975. Bakit? Birthday nung inyong commander, ha? Sa Northeast Cay, yung Southeast Cay, which was Pugad, ha? Anong ginawa ng mga sundalo natin na nasa Southeast Cay? Aba, ang ginawa ng Vietnam, Danny, nagregalo ng mga chicks. At nagsasayaw na doon, nagkakaraoke na doon sa Northeast Cay. Naglaway ho yung mga sundalo sa Southeast Cay. Pupunta sila. At syempre, nagkainuman at nagkatulugan. Pagising nila, babalik sila sa Southeast Cay. Wala na ho. Nakamasinggan na siya. Iba na ho ang banderang lumilipad. And that is how the military lost Pugad Island. Kaya huwag kayong magmamalaki sa amin. And right now, with what you're doing, itong worry ko kami ito. What the National Security Council is doing under Ed Año, what the PCG is doing under Ronnie Hill Gaban and this Tariela, and what the Philippine Navy is doing. Baka ho, hindi lamang isang salop ang mawala sa atin dyan sa South China Sea. Kaya hanggat maaga, Mr. Trinidad, Rear Admiral Trinidad, magbasa-basa ka pa. Dahil marami ka pa, despite your 2 stars, marami ka pang kakanin para maging circumspective ang pananaw mo.
Okay.
Hindi lamang yung orden ng mga Amerikano dapat ang sundan nyo dyan. Gamitin nyo ang utak ninyo kung paano nyo mas maayos mapuproteksyonan ang taong bayan.
Okay. I think magkakaroon ng major transition in the next few months kahit ang mentality ng ating armed forces at Philippine Coast Guard with the new members of the Senate at a new mood after this election. Let's just read the reaction of Maan Cerezo. Good discussion watching from Kuwait. Pati Defensor says, I think our leaders need to be lectured on all of these, sirs, because it's their ignorance on these matters that are the true source of tension among fellow claimants. Aside from the interference ng foreign power galing sa kanluran, that's a very, very major factor. Kasi sunod-sunuran yung ating ilang mga kasundaluhan at mga spokesman ng kung ano-anong task force sa maritime security. Well, anyway, it's now 7:18. Anything significant pa dito sa ating Facebook? RevGov now, sabi ni Web Valencia, negosyo ba ang the governance? Let's go, Kimura Dolores, of course, Edmar, JKA Cebu Scholar. Sobra-sobra na kasi ang pagkalasing natin sa mga pambubudol ng mga Amerikano. Agreed, absolutely. Let's go further down. Meron pa ba? Sa Iloilo, so Iloilo is not thinking. I don't know what that means, but let's scroll down further. Anything interesting? Sabi ni Flex and Cheta, pleasant day to all. In my 1 cent view, the Bam Aquino vote from Gen Z is improbable. I estimate perhaps only half of the Bam vote is from voting Gen Z. Assuming 10 million is half, then each school tour yielded 10,000 votes per school in 30 days. Campaign tour of schools, that would yield 33 more or less schools per day, or 10-hour campaign per day requires more one to address 3 to 4 schools per hour and yield 10,000 votes per school, including na pamilya pa, including na family pa. Well, if you factor the social media impact, speculative na, realistic ba ang Gen Z vote? But the analysis is good. Let's keep studying this because it's very significant. Yes, go ahead.
Just add something to that. Yeah, there were 2 yellow-pink candidates, Pam Aquino, of course, and Kiko Pangilinan. But if the official COMELEC results are anything to go by, we can see that Kiko has 15 million and Lenny got 14. So that's about the same. So the people who voted for Lenny voted for him. But the interesting thing here is Bam has 20 million, which is about 5 million more than Pangilinan, which means that because of the INC endorsement that added a couple million more, plus the moderates, plus the centrists, and the other DDS pro-Duterte who are sympathetic. Because as Ambassador Bobby Tiglao said, many people simply are dissatisfied with Marcos. They look at the ballot. Who is the antithesis of Marcos, at least in the common mind of the common knowledge of the people? It is the Aquino. So many of them also shaded that as a revenge against Marcos. So that's how I view it personally.
Yeah. Well, let me see. There are a lot of interesting comments to read out, but we have run out of time. It's 11:21. Let's go to the list of, any other hands raised now more? Edmund Pancha, thank you for your comment. You must be facing some problems with your internet. You have not been able to join in sa discussion. No? Okay, I think, Danny, we can wrap up already. Okay. Any last comment from Kado?
Maraming salamat po mga kabansa. As usual, binigyan kami ng pagkakataon na ma-explain ang mga whys and wherefores at hindi lamang dahil sinabi ni ganito o sinabi ni ganoon, kundi tuluyan po kami nagsasaliksik sa Asian Century Strategic Studies Institute, no? Para po madala natin sa tunay na kalinawan. Alam nyo, apelyido ko Paglinawan. Kaya ang aking advocacy ay linawin
Yes.
ang mga issues na lalo na yung mga sensitive issues na kinukonfront na ating bansa. Kung hindi po natin, at yan ang tanong pala ni Amy Marcos, daan-daang bilyon ang intelligence fund ninyo dahil sa Armed Forces of the Philippines. Bakit ang produkto ninyo? Hindi nyo ma-explain yan eh. Nangangahulugan lamang na yung mga nakakalam yung mga kaalaman, datos, ay hindi nyo sa Pilipino binibigay, kundi kung sino man yung mga nasa likod nyo dyan, mga aninong gumagalaw dyan. At kung ano lamang ang iabot sa inyo, yun lamang ang babasahin nyo para sa taong bayan. Mali po yan. Tapos yung pang mga hindi nag-agree sa way of thinking nyo, in your rule-based international order way of thinking, sila pa tatawagin nyo ng mga traitor? Huwag naman po. Alamin natin ang katotohanan because the truth will set us free. Salamat po.
Okay, and my last words is be prepared for major changes in the coming months. At huwag na po tayo mangnimi tungkol sa Philippine-China relations. Kailangan ng Pilipinas ang tulong ng China, ang suporta ng China, at ituloy-tuloy na po natin itong pagsulong po ng independent foreign policy. Back to you, Danny.
Thank you, Kamentong Kado, for your presentations today. I'm thankful for those who have listened and appreciate also my humble observations about this election season. Thank you to everyone who joined us in this live, in Facebook, in YouTube, and via Zoom, our reactors, Casel Sokainglet, Sir Ed Pancha, and all the others, and also, of course, those who will be joining us in the replay in Facebook, Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for joining us in this lively and enlightening discussion. We'll see you next time. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you.